Welcome to Scaling with Agility. I'm Yuval, and today I'm excited to have a conversation with Tyson Bertmaring and Michelle Holliday, partners for a journey of stewardship and agility. Welcome to the show, Tyson, Michelle. Michelle, you wanna get started? Tell us who you are, why you're here, what are you focused on?
Sure. Thank you so much. I'm a consultant, a facilitator, an author, a researcher. My focus is on stewardship, introducing stewardship into organizations, the practice and mindsets in order to support thrivability, the ability to thrive within organizations at every level. And I'm joining from Montreal. Maybe that's enough for now.
And my name's Tyson, and the story we're going to talk about today is one that took place for over about 3 years within Dino Therapeutics. I was responsible for the G&A, the general and administrative portion of the company, and I was passionate to get into thinking about how we can integrate the work that we're doing together to make the organization more effective and more enjoyable to work in. And it took us down a path of thinking about different ways of working. And my background in program management and Scrum gave me a thought of, hey, maybe there's different ways for us to do that.
Awesome. So maybe a bit of context of the first time I met Tyson was exactly that journey at Dino, where Dino was already practicing agile in some ways in its scientific work. And if people want to learn more about that, we will link to a couple of podcasts where Tyson and others that story. One of the things that we've started to realize at some point is as we're improving the agility of the science organization, let's call it the real product organization, it brought to light some questions and some opportunities when it comes to the rest of the organization. So maybe let's start with that. What did you see, Tyson, both at Dino as well as I think in earlier organizations that you were involved with when you looked at everything beyond the science, what we call G&A in organizations often.
Yeah. So I started off in the military, and you can imagine it's very command and control,
I don't have
very
to imagine.
bureaucratic.
Yes. But others that haven't been, yes.
Yeah, but it's and needless. I think it's needed to some extent, just based on the complexity. Not the complexity. I would say the. Actually, I don't know. I'm not going to defend it. I'm just going to say it is what it is. There's a lot of control and bureaucratic processes that you have to follow. And like I remember one story where it took us a year to order office chairs for the entire organization. This is in the military. And if you boil it all down, it was just because the government has been burned at some point in the past with somebody maybe taking advantage of a little bit of freedom to do procurement. And they create all these rules that require you to go through a bunch of unnecessary steps to get things done. I left the military and moved into the private sector, and a lot of the same things were present, but the organizations were much smaller. And it just, whenever I saw something where I had to get approval for something that seemed trivial, that was definitely within my area of responsibility, or like get approval on something I already did, there's things that just didn't make any sense. It just spoke to me that the organization doesn't trust its employees. But I don't think that was why. It was just that's just the way things have always been done. And so we just keep doing the same things over and over again. And so what really motivated me was let's rethink how we're doing things, and let's really lean into this principle of trust. If we trust people to work on $1 million experiments, we should probably trust them to make, $10,000 decisions. And that was really the driving force. It was like, how can we create the conditions for people to work together in a more trusting environment with less bureaucracy, unnecessary bureaucracy?
Michelle, is that a common thread that you're seeing in organizations? The
Hmm.
problems that Tyson is talking about? I call it the rules that have been written in blood. That's how we call that in the Israeli Air Force. And
Interesting.
it's the risk. It's always fighting the old issue, the old risk.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
closing the barn after the horses have left. Whatever metaphor.
Right. Right. I was in a conversation about this yesterday. We see it at every level of society, and there's a push for deregulation of government. And there must be a third way that isn't free for all and isn't control everything unnecessarily. So, this is what I heard in what you were saying, Tyson. And it's interesting you bring up the military because what I also heard from you 3 years ago is a yearning for the sense of cohesion that you experience in the
Mm,
military. So, how can we each individually be trusted? And also, how can we be more cohesive as a unit?
mhm.
And those two seem to be connected kind of in ways that aren't at the surface level, but we need both. So, yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the military and that's another piece that I remember.
We talk about it often as maybe a paradox, but not necessarily between these two things, between cohesion and individuality, between alignment and autonomy.
Mhm.
So one interesting exploration is what does it look like when we have just one of these things in the organization? What does it look like when we have none? And what needs to be true to create an environment where we have both? And I think maybe that's where we can go next. I guess your vision, Tyson, for the G&A organization at Dino is learning from the different organizations, different experiences. What would it look like to have both? So let's maybe chart what does that ideal vision look like, and then maybe talk about what's the path there and how does it meet agility. So what was your vision? What did you have in mind? How does stewardship fit into it?
Maybe I'll start with decisions. I think it all comes down to, or it isn't all, a lot of it comes down to enabling people to have agency, especially where they are equipped to have agency. So you can think about it from how can we adjust the way that general administration, these departments, how they enable employees across the company to make decisions they're suited to make. Like for example, I have a home office and I need to equip it with things to make me successful at work. You know, on one side, a company could say this is a standard approach; everybody gets the same thing, and that may be administratively easy, but it's going to not necessarily serve the needs of the individuals. The other side of it could be a free for all, and it's like, hey, you can get whatever you want, and you're gonna have some people that are gonna go crazy and ruin it for everyone. But there's something in the middle where you're basically providing a framework for people to make decisions. And the way that we thought about it was there's principles that you can put in place that and also rules. So some things that are black and white and enforceable, and then some things that are really unique to the individual's context. But between those two things, and also like the goal, like why are we actually providing you home office equipment to do your job? Between those three elements, goals, principles, and rules, the thinking is that there should be a sufficient amount of context for each person to navigate in their own context to make a decision that's right for them. So that's one way to think is how can we empower employees to make decisions? And it can be as simple as what's in my home office. It can also go to way more complicated decisions. And then the other way to think about it is how do we help people within G&A, the people that are providing the services to the organization, how to help them make decisions on how to design their individual services so that they are aligned with the whole, so that like one service in finance doesn't necessarily get designed in a way that creates problems for, let's say, HR and vice versa. And so I think it's both ways. It's like how do we create the conditions for employees to make better decisions for them, and then also for the whole, and then also for the service providers to do the same thing. So I just think about it as decisions.
And I could add to that that it's not a single move to create those conditions. It's not a one-time introduction of a rule or a principle, even, that it's something lived and practiced and deepened over time. So, in introducing principles, we also introduce practices of revisiting them, of sharing stories of how we made decisions and what information was necessary, what more information might be helpful the next time. So, it's easy to think that it's It's just about setting up a certain static infrastructure, but it's really about a culture, ultimately, a culture supported by rules, principles, kind of the tangible structural things, and also the somewhat less tangible relational infrastructure as well.
And I guess for me, that's where the connection to agility comes in. So one term I use for what you're describing, Michelle, is an operating system. And what I hear you say, which is the way I think about it, is you cannot just install an operating system, not off the shelf, and not even something based on custom development for the organization. It needs to be evolving. The organization is complex, it's evolving, it's organic. Your operating system should evolve with it as well. For me, the whole notion of agility applied here is because we don't know for sure what the operating system with the culture, the principles should look like. We should try something and see how it's working, really see how it's working. What's the effect on the people in G&A, the people in the rest of the company? Does it resonate? Does it create the cohesion that we want? Does it enable the agency that we want? Or is it creating a free for all? And adjust it and adjust it in small iterations over time.
Exactly. Exactly. I like the operating system metaphor. We worked also with an organic metaphor, that it's an ecology. Therefore, it's relational, therefore, it's emergent and evolving, and there are structural and static things within any ecology as well. So there are multiple ways to think about this approach and understanding.
I guess that I really like the framing of ecology. What I'm wondering is, what is the thing that, is there a thing that you do to help an ecology thrive? Like,
Mhm.
what's that thing called, if not
Yeah.
operating system?
I think it's called stewardship.
Yeah.
It's like gardening, it's tending, it's being in relationship with the system, finding ways to sense, to see and
So that's
notice
the
and
verb, that's the activity, right? But what's the
to steward.
is there an artifact or isn't there? Like, am I looking for something that's not there? Like, what's
It's
the
a whole
result
system.
of being in
The
steward?
Mhm.
artifacts the system, right? Like
Yeah.
when, like what Michelle's talking about, like tending, like one of the metaphors you can use is a gardener, right? They're pulling weeds when they're not supposed to be there. They're watering. They're doing a lot of things to ensure that the conditions are good in that garden for the garden as a whole to thrive. And that's not the responsibility of like any one person in the organization. That's all of our responsibilities in different ways. And I think what, Michelle, you're also getting at with the relational infrastructure is the stronger and the more relationships that exist within that organization, the easier it is to tend to the whole success of the
Mm.
organization. And so where you see organizations that maybe it doesn't seem as rich when it comes to the relationships, the depth and the amount of, like, it's relying on like 3 or 4 people to basically hold the whole thing together, like, that's really fragile versus, like, everybody being a part, and it's actually much easier and much more enjoyable to be a part of those organizations. Because everybody, like, because like, you don't wanna be in the garden, like, being the only person picking weeds, you want, like, everybody in there picking weeds if they see it, right?
We talked a lot about soil as a metaphor within this ecology or ecosystem concept, that it's invisible, but that's where the real work happens. That's how the plants grow. And so all of these projects, all of these activities are enabled by well aggregated, well connected soil. People seem to be able to
So I
relate.
guess that all makes sense. I guess the question maybe a listener might ask themselves is, okay, I do all of these things, but let's try to work with the garden metaphor. There's working day in and day out in the garden, or week in and week out in the garden. Okay. That's actual work to grow the garden. But there's also the work on shaping the garden, deciding this is what I want to do in this area. This is an area with a lot of, you know, wildflowers, weeds, whatever. Do I feel good about it? Do I want to make a change in it? there are two layers of work, and there's also the sketch, or the, you called it the system earlier, Tyson. What is the plan? The current plan, not the original plan, but currently, somebody goes to my garden. What is the intent, the current intent of that garden, the aggregation of its rules, principles, goals, the thing that we tend to? Is there a name for it? Like, I get that the name of the thing is being in stewardship. I also call it developing. You're developing your system, your garden, whatever. But one challenge that I see with both myself as well as talking to other people that are trying to wrap their heads around this is, what are we developing? Like, when we're building products, when we're trying to find capsids, it's pretty clear what the product is. When we're developing our company's ecosystem, ecology, whatever you want to call it, what's the right name, or what's the name that would resonate for people as what is it that they're supposed to be spending
Yeah,
time developing,
I think
tending, being in stewardship for?
I think I know where you're going with this on this one. And the word that we used, Michelle, was flow. You really want to create flow in the organization. Like, you just want to make it really, really easy to accomplish the goals. Like, we're not saying stewardship is in replace of the things that we know we need, which is a company strategy and company goals. It's really about how we're working together to make it easier to do those things. So yeah, like, yeah, that's essentially it, right? And like, to be able to configure the system in a way that is conducive for everybody to flow, like, isn't the decision of a few people in the company at the very top to figure out, because they don't know everything. Everyone needs to be in practice of stewardship together to realize that system.
And I can add a layer to that as well. We talked about how living systems work, how living systems thrive, that there are diverse parts, and we want those to thrive and contribute as fully as possible. There are structures and patterns of relationship. We want flow there. And there's a whole that ideally is greater than the sum of the parts. And we want that to have as much capacity as possible. And we want to do that. The fourth aspect of living system is that there is life. There is more potential and more complexity than anyone can know and control. So this is where stewardship comes in, that we're sensing and we're tending to those conditions. So we started this conversation talking about the most possible optimal agency for individuals so that it's enjoyable for them to work there, so that we get the best of their productivity and their contributions. We want flow in decision making and in relationships, and we also want the whole system to have more capacity than just a bunch of separate individuals. So what came to mind for me when you asked the question just now, Yuval, was most of all that capacity. What we're cultivating is capacity. But you're absolutely right, Tyson. That only happens when there's flow, when there's agency, when it all holds together as a cohesive approach. And I would include organizational strategy in that as well. It all comes together in the capacity of the whole.
So I'm hearing us describing desirable attributes of the way an organizational system, a company system operates. We want there to be flow. We want there to be growth in capacity. We want there to be agency. We want there to be cohesion across individuals and functions, while there's excellence in functions. I think part of the system that we're describing is what are the attributes that we're looking for, which, could be useful in and of itself. What's the target state? What's the goal we're striving towards? Like you're saying, the more people are aware of these goals for the system, for the ecology, the more everybody can drive towards it, rather than, just a few people. So I'm curious, Tyson, if you look at your experience trying to bring this language of stewardship and goal of the system to Dino, what's worked well? What have been some of the challenges? Like, if I go wake up somebody in G&A or in the scientific organization, middle of the night, and use this language with them? What kind of conversation would it be? Or not middle of the night, or over coffee in the morning?
Yeah, maybe the easiest way to explain the primary feeling that people have moving into this initially, because it was difficult, is that if you look at typical modern organizations, we've designed them so that there's very little overlap between people. We kind of put people in little boxes, and there's space around the box where they're not overlapping with somebody else. And everyone's happy because they have agency in what they're doing. But we all know there's like things that slip through the cracks that, like, well, those two people didn't talk at the right time, or they needed to work on that together, but they didn't know because they just think of themselves as two different boxes. But we accept that to be like, that's just how work is. We don't necessarily see that as that's a problem where we need to rethink the way that we're working. What stewardship does is it puts people like overlapping in some ways. It causes those little boxes on the organizational chart to get a little blurry, and that makes people uncomfortable. Like, what am I responsible for? What are you responsible for? So that whole tension around responsibilities and who's supposed to be the one that makes the decision on certain things, those things start to get challenging for people to navigate through. And you go through a period of that. I think it's natural to go through a period of like, okay, so we're supposed to be working in this way. Okay, let's figure out how to navigate that and come to a new, higher plane of existence. So I would say if you talk to people, it would be, that they might not say it in the same words that I'm saying, but essentially what we did was deliberately put people into conflict with each other, and going through that journey together and coming out on the other side better is what I think it's worth. What then enables flow and enables more of these things.
You make it sound pretty terrible, doesn't it? It's uncomfortable. We put them in conflict. We make it blurry, and yeah, all of that is true. And I remember people were unhappy. People were stressed, and bad decisions were being made. And now I'm painting it in extremes, but it's hard to be isolated and not to have full information. That's also uncomfortable. And to be just churning out stuff without full awareness of what it's contributing to. So I remember people first saying, I don't have time to collaborate with these other people sitting next to me. I am just full out. I got no extra gas or capacity. And how is this going to change my day-to-day? And our answer was, you have to. The only way out of this kind of rat race is to collaborate. And it will change your day-to-day for the better. Like, that's the idea. We're not trying to make it worse. And that's what I saw happening as well. Creating patterns and structures of being in relationship, sharing information, helped people make better decisions, be more effective, and ultimately more efficient, be more joyful. It felt more like belonging. It felt more agile. Yuval, only living systems, only something that's alive can be agile. It's such a beautiful fit. All of the methods and principles of agility are exactly what's needed in a stewardship approach. And, it's a difficult shift. It's not only a shift in practices, but in mindset. But the goal is that it's better.
Yeah. I mean, if I think through the Taylorism that you're talking about, Tyson, where we design organizations for efficiency, we build departments. It's the classic way we scale organizations, right? At the beginning, there's one person that does everything. The founders take care of everything. I'm a solo consultant. There aren't a lot of conflicts between the finance people and the sales people in my organization. But, at some point when organizations scale, the typical play, the responsible adults play, is to split into functions, to bring in a responsible adult CFO, responsible adult head of people. In product teams, make the developer that is great at user experience or user interface.
Yeah.
Get them to hire people in that space and own that space and specialize and over specialize and become very, very specialized in the one thing so that you can be very efficient in it. And one of the things that I see in organizations that I meet is that the result of that specialization is that people convince themselves that their work is decoupled, that they can do things themselves without collaborating. They've convinced themselves that that's the right way to work. I asked them, where are the dependencies in your work? How do you let's look at your work and look for the dependencies. It's hard to see them even though they're there, because people are telling themselves this lie in order to feel good about the way they're working, that they can actually be self-sufficient. They can do this thing. But this thing is not valuable in and of itself. It's just a piece of a widget. So yes, I agree with you, Michelle. In Agile, in agility, we connect these silos to create value, to organize around outcomes and value, and tending to an ecosystem that connects different pieces in stewardship. It's the same thing, or it's the same vibe. We're looking to work on the system. We're looking to get away from, or to maintain, the expertise that comes through the specialization, but connect the dots for people. And it's uncomfortable to people. It's uncomfortable to people that are working on the science, to get the scientists working in the lab, to talk to the ML and AI engineers and the computational biology. Those are people that think very differently originally, and we're trying to create a melting pot for these people. And it's hard for UI engineers to be together with backend developers, and they resist it. They say, we don't need this.
Yeah.
Why are you forcing us to do this weird thing?
Yeah. And I don't think it stays there. It doesn't stay uncomfortable. It requires some adjustment. And then there's value, because as you start to see more of the system, you realize that you can make better decisions. So that's the very practical part of it. And also in well-hosted, well-structured conversations with your peers, it also feels good and human. It feels like belonging rather than isolation. So it's awkward and difficult at first, and then incredibly rewarding on multiple levels.
So speaking of rewarding and how to sell this, if I look at the role today, it's very different than the role of even 3 or 4 years ago when we were navigating this journey. It seems like everything is managed, even more things are managed through Excel sheets these days. And rewarding, it might be, I don't know what you're seeing. Are you seeing people motivated, more people motivated to do this through the fact that it creates a more rewarding experience for them and their organizations? Or are you finding yourselves having to give a more tangible explanation of what's the benefit of stewardship? I find myself having to reach out to more tangible benefits to agility, for sure.
It makes me think of this conference that you recently organized, Tyson, which was a bit of a show don't tell, as I understand it. Like, you didn't sell it as stewardship of this broad system, but it was. And it was bringing people together in conversation in a relationship who wouldn't normally be that way.
You're
How did that go?
You're talking about Genetic Agency, the
Yes.
Genetic Agency Technology
Yeah.
Conference. Yeah, the whole conference was organized around a single purpose. Like, we're all here because we want to, the work that we're doing, we want to enable individuals, patients, to have more choice over how they improve their genetic health. And that's something that everybody could connect their work to. So how are you connecting that to this? You're saying that.
I'm saying that was a similar approach to what we did within Dino. There was a bit of selling stewardship, but most of all, there was, how do we accomplish the company's mission better? That's at the center. These are some ways we can do that. We're going to experiment with different ways of collaborating in order to accomplish the company's mission more effectively. And And we tried some stuff out. We tried out being in conversation in different ways, in different configurations,
Yeah.
and then grew it from there. So that's part of my answer, Yuval, to how do you sell it? You don't necessarily sell stewardship, but you sell what it's in service of. And just to get a little bit in the opposite direction, esoteric, I think what the world needs more than anything is spaces where we can practice being in diversity and complexity. Diversity meaning just difference, different functions, different types of personalities, different priorities, and to navigate that complexity together. So I see a lot of interest in that, as long as it's in service of something that we all care about. It can't be
Hmm.
random and generic, but if we have a common purpose, then this is a really welcome way of working towards that purpose. That's what I see.
Hmm.
So maybe there's a structure that I'm trying to work with for agility. So maybe a diversion for a second. So in the world of agile, in the world of agility, one of the patterns that we're seeing is people don't care about agile anymore. Not as much. Fewer people care about it. So it doesn't make sense. And I think we've even seen that at Dino. It wasn't about uppercase A agile. That wasn't the purpose. The purpose was agility of the organization, helping Dino find fit for purpose ways to do science and fit for purpose ways to, run the company's operating system, whatever. Um, but what I find is that in order for the mission of agility to reach more people these days, it needs to connect to expensive problems that the organizations have, for lucrative opportunities that the organizations have, as well as probably to some philosophical thrive or problem that people feel like this shouldn't be the way we work. Like Tyson is a great example. Tyson has this, in my experience, in my perspective, this burning fire of this is the wrong way to do G&A. Beyond the tangible impact of this wrongness, tell me if I'm wrong, Tyson, but I feel like for you, we need to do it in a better way.
Hmm.
For other people, a lot of it is, okay, there's that, but also how is that going to move the needle?
Yeah.
How is that going to help us achieve our organization's mission? For them, there's this component. So what I'm looking for in the world of agile is, what is this problem that people are feeling? Then what do we do and what are the results? So with agile, it could be we want to improve the organization's speed and impact and predictability and those kind of things. And we could talk about results. I'm curious, what would that look like in the world of stewardship? Like, what's the problem that if the listener is seeing in their G&A organization or in their company overall, they might want to think about stewardship as a lens, a perspective, an activity to work towards a better ecosystem?
Yeah, it's like I think every single time, if you're operating in your company, every single time you come up against a policy that you don't understand, and it doesn't make any, and when you do understand, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't actually contribute to the mission. It's just a relic of, well, that's just what we've done. That's just how the industry operates, but it doesn't need to happen that way. So every single time you come up against a hurdle that makes it harder for you to accomplish the mission of the company in a responsible way is an instance of why we should be doing something differently. And I imagine for most listeners, that probably happens every day. There's something.
And I could add, to me, stewardship is recognition of the complexity of an organization and therefore of the need not only for command and control. And there are things that need to be controlled, but not everything. So to recognize what should instead be tended and how to be in the practice of discerning that, of noticing and sensing, and not as an individual, but as a system. Develop the system capacity to notice where there's something that is wrong or potential that could be developed. So if we're asking what's the problem that it solves, it's either individuals are burned out, stressed out, not contributing as much as they could, not productive, whatever, at the level of the parts, as I said earlier, or there's some aspect of infrastructure and flow that's blocked or that's possible that you want to explore, or there's not enough cohesion and we're not delivering on the mission. So really, it's a function of noticing all of that complexity, all of the life in the system, and growing as much capacity to notice and tend together.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me add to what you just said, Michelle. One tension that we uncovered was the way that we're working is different than the way the industry works. And as an individual, you're thinking about your career after Dino, and you want to set yourself up for success there, right? And there's a, for most of these functions, there's a typical career progression where you make it, you keep ascending. And the experiences and the work that you're doing may not neatly map to that very functional specific trajectory that you may want to be on. And so one tension is, well, how can you sell that what we're doing here is actually setting you up for even more success than the trajectory that you've been told you need to take, which is going up, let's say, the HR track or the IT track or something like that. By operating within a system like this and exposing yourself to not just a subsystem, but the whole system, you become a much more complete thinker about how a company actually works. And so even if you want to continue up that track in HR, for example, you're going to do so with a much better appreciation for how companies function. And I think selling it that way to the individual can make them realize, oh, okay, this may be different than maybe other organizations that I'll work at in the future, but I'll leave this company with even more skills than I would if we stay with a more traditional G&A function.
And let me give a really simple example because it sounds really abstract and philosophical, I think. But Tyson, you brought up the home office equipment scenario. That was real. That was a very simple situation. We thought it's pretty simple. Let's explore what a stewardship approach to that would look like. This dilemma. How do we handle home office equipment? And it had been done in a fragmented, siloed way. So operations made some decisions. First, that everybody gets, I think it was, everybody gets the same thing.
Gets a kit.
Yeah, that wasn't happy for the individuals. Then here's the full menu, and people liked that better, but it cost the company a lot of money. So then there was the policy that you get a budget, but you get to keep the equipment when you leave. This was kind of a new twist. And that seemed because part of the issue was, what do we do with all of this random inventory then when people leave? So that created an unintended consequence. So then the choice from operations was, well, just keep it. But then we discovered from finance that makes it a taxable benefit. So okay, we didn't see that coming. So we brought together those different perspectives in a conversation to understand what is this ecology that surrounds this policy for home office equipment. And it was a wiser choice then, a wiser policy decision in the end that took into account operations, the individual employees' needs and interests, the company's budget and limits, and also tax policy. So it's just finding your way to wisdom and effectiveness and as much efficiency as makes sense.
Yeah. And then that was we did that at immigration. We did that for COVID-19. There were lots of different policies that applied to that approach.
So maybe to connect it to the world of agile. In agile, we talk about development, right? An important decision in the life of an organization, a system, a product is, what are the things we should just run? We should run a policy. We should run a service. We should operate it. And what are the things which we need to develop? What you're talking about, Michelle, is developing and evolving a service to the employee and ability to work effectively from home. And one of the ways we get out of the deep specialization is in this case, you've created a cross-functional team that has the people from the different functions. They each represent their function, but even the fact that they have direct conversations, they work through a challenge together, they develop, they see, they sense, they respond to what they see from the actual experience, the early warning signals or traction or whatever it is. As they're working through this together, things rub off. The person from operations that is working in the same room, in the same team with somebody that's focused on finance and somebody that's focused on IT and somebody that's focused on HR, they start to learn some stuff. It doesn't mean that they'll become an HR expert
Exactly.
overnight. We don't need them to. They don't necessarily want to, but they have a better shot at being the first operations employee in a new startup where they do need to be more of a generalist, what we call a T-shaped person, and they become a better asset to even a bigger team. But what that requires is the leaders of these groups also acknowledging the value of being T-shaped and expecting and finding people and nurturing people that want to do this, that want to become T-shaped. And there are a lot of overlaps between that and what we see in development organizations. It's non-trivial to acknowledge that the great UI engineer also cares about the other aspects of the product that they're building. And when I was back in the trenches, one of the best experiences was to go to the customer site, to travel from Israel to New York to LA to a customer site and work on the system that the customer is using. Both because you saw the customer and the real experience of the system, but also because it required you to understand how to operate the whole system. You didn't have a front-end engineer and a back-end and a networking person. You had to do it all. And that was a growth experience that we tried to make sure everybody undergoes.
Really nice.
Yeah.
You were saying something earlier about different levels of work. And one of the ways I talk about that is the ant's eye view and the bird's eye view, and inviting people to take a bird's eye view. And they never lose that perspective. Even as they go down to the ant's eye view, they take it with them and become T-shaped, as you're saying. Yeah.
It's becoming T-shaped, and it's becoming, I think there are a couple of things here. One is understanding the whole value stream, understanding everything that needs to happen, all of the different roles of the ants in the colony. But it's also, for me, the bird's eye view is not just understanding, it's also working on the architecture of the colony, evolving, deciding, what do we need to do now? Is this sufficient? Is this effective? What are some ways we should be beyond our, I don't know, do ants really think about developing their colony? I don't know. But
instinct.
Yeah, it's instinct. So we want to get beyond instinct is part of what we're saying here. The advantage we have as human beings is we could step out of the instinct of running our organization day in and day out and think proactively about designing it and evolving it. And we can tend to our organizations. If we don't, we're like ants.
Yeah.
And we can draw on collective intelligence as well.
One thing I want to add here is a listener may be wondering, well, like, what does this actually look like in practice? And at the highest level, we're not saying that you get rid of the relationship that exists functionally, where you have someone that may have a lot of experience in HR and then people that perform HR services. Well, we're saying we keep that, and horizontally, if we can organize the G&A function into a collection of services versus a collection of individuals on an org chart, then you can organize those services into teams, like working groups, cross-functional teams, whatever you want to call them. You organize them based on which set of services are highly independent with each other, interdependent with each other. And that's how you work on a day-to-day basis, but you still have your functional leadership to lean on for your functional growth, because that's still important.
I actually see a couple of different alternatives. So going back to the ant's eye view and the bird's eye view, the ant's eye view is the instinct running the service. I could see, I think we've even seen a dyno, that running the service could still be through the classic departmental structure
True.
of G&A, especially if we've done a good job of decoupling, automating, especially in these days with AI. Maybe we don't even need humans as part of
Yeah.
running the service. Maybe, AI can be the ants, and humans can take the bird's eye view more of the time. In the bird's eye view, it's especially crucial to look across the value stream. So to make it concrete, if your OKR, let's say your goal, your rock for this quarter is we really struggle with onboarding new talent. It's a huge headache for the people that are in the organization. It's a huge headache for people that want to come. We're hearing from people that they've burned out even before they joined the organization, and we want to revamp it. So what we might do in the quarter is take the bird's eye view. We might bring together people from talent acquisition, from leaders inside the organization that are interviewing people from operations, whatever it is, whoever needs to be part of the view in order to really look at the whole ecosystem. And these people might work together. They might work together for a while on developing a new increment of how we do onboarding, of the onboarding product, and they might actually run that increment for a while, tend to the onboarding for a while, but eventually they might split up. We don't necessarily need that team to continue forever. That's a choice. There's a concrete handoff point between developing the services that we provide and running.
So what you're saying, Yuval, is that the function still operates services that are going well. There's no need to improve them. We're just running the service. But if we need to develop a new service, or if we need to improve an existing service, then you form teams around that. And that could be for any length of time. It could be a week, it could be a month, it could be a quarter, a year, whatever much time is necessary until the goal is accomplished. That's essentially what you're talking about? But the actual functional operations of a service that's performing as expected stays within the function or department.
That's definitely one pattern I see often. In some cases, the result of taking the bird's eye view might be, we actually need a cross-functional team on an ongoing basis. Maybe onboarding, we really need the cross-functional team to look at the onboarding day in and day out rather than run it in silos.
Mm-hmm.
But that might be the result of the development team working on that concept.
Mm-hmm. That brings up another aspect too, is that there's certain people that really enjoy work that's just, you tell me what to do and I'm just going to keep doing this work. So that's more of like an operational service that's just running really well. And they take pride in making sure that it runs well. And then there's some folks that they really just want to spend all their time designing and like improving and not operating. And that's a challenge. That's a challenge to navigate in stewardship, is that you have a collection of people that are kind of both of those types of people, but the work isn't stable enough to be able to line people up in a way that's best meets their needs and best meets the organization's needs. So this goes back to what you're saying, Michelle, like it's constantly evolving and living, and that's what makes this like challenging, but you need to have the frameworks and the structures in place to allow you to change with that.
I guess the question is, do you force ants to become birds, or do you let them be ants? Like, I would say you invite them to take the bird's eye view, but accept that some ants want to be ants.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was definitely part of our approach at Dyno. Put out an invitation and notice who are the ones who thrive at the bird's eye level, and do small experiments with them to demonstrate to the others, and know that some people will never see what they see, but it will broaden the circle.
And hire for birds if you have a chance, probably.
Yeah, we talked so much about the importance of curiosity in hiring for curiosity. And it's really a system view that takes the shape of curiosity.
We haven't talked we managed to talk for almost an hour without talking about AI, which is great. I'm happy we've done that. I think
But you
there
brought it up once. Then we probably don't need
okay,
humans
once. Yeah.
at the end time. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. So I
We
guess
just didn't
maybe
get to that point of the arc. We just didn't get to that point in the arc. I think we would have gotten there.
I think maybe a follow-up conversation can be about what does the ends say? How does the world of the ends change with AI? Like, is there less need for ants, fewer ants? Do more of the ants need to become birds to thrive in the
Mhm,
world of AI?
I
mhm.
think the answer is yes. Like I think what's going to happen, it's the same thing that's happened everywhere, like e-commerce everywhere, right? Like those roles that don't necessarily need a lot of human judgment are easy to replace with automation. And where humans need to continually evolve to is to a higher state of a system understanding, not just to be relevant in the workforce, but I think as a society for us to solve problems, like big, huge problems are on a global scale. Like we need to be spending more of our brain capacity on the system than on things that computers can do.
We need to be using more of our brain capacity, period, is
Yeah.
the way I'm
And
hearing.
Yeah.
not only the individual brain, but the collective brain.
Collective brain. Yeah, exactly. But that's part of the individual is to be able to connect into that.
Right.
Cool. All right. So we might that might be a fascinating follow-up conversation in this arc. What does stewardship look like in the age of AI? So sign me up. For today, I think let's call it a wrap.
Yep.
But before that, if people want to dive deeper, meanwhile, if people want to dive deeper into stewardship, Michelle, where would you send them? How do
Well,
they?
I have a book called The Age of Thrivability: Vital Perspectives and Practices for a Better World. That's one place, and a
Awesome.
website called Thrivable World.
And Tyson, how do people stay up to date with what you're trying to do in the world of biotech?
So now I've shifted my attention from internal, from G&A to actually thinking about partnership ecosystems. So that's actually where I'm spending most of my time right now is how do we move away from more or less a hub and spoke model where you partner with companies and they only really interact with you to one where you can form networks and then even ecosystems where there's emergence that's possible, emergence of opportunity for everyone can benefit from. How do we do this also to share information that can be relevant for all of us? Essentially, how can we do this in a way that allows us to benefit from both competition and collaboration at the same time? And so this is where I'm spending most of my time. A lot of what we did in stewardship for those 3 years is I'm leaning on a lot of that knowledge. And then also before that with Scrum and agile ways of working. But maybe if you just want to reach out to me and my email and I'm happy to answer questions. It's a journey, right? There's a lot to still do.
Awesome. Cool. All right. We'll share links to all of that in the show notes. Thank you, listener, for staying with us, exploring how to scale organizations with agility and stewardship. For Tyson and Michelle, I'm Yuval. See you next time.
Hmm.